speaker of this keynote speech is Professor John Morley. I don't think we need any explanation to John. I think John is the king of frailty and sarcopenia research. So in this room, everybody should know his name. So now he's a professor of St. Louis University School of Medicine and also with Waterstand University in South Africa. And actually, he was born in South Africa and moved to the States. So the title of his talk today is Future Research of Frailty and Sarcopenia. So, John, well, let's welcome John with a big round of applause.
For inviting me, and I think putting together a wonderful conference. I think it's been very enjoyable, and it makes it much easier for me to give the talk because I've heard everything I was going to tell you anyhow. So let's see what we can do. I think what we've got to understand that if you look at the WHO approach of resilience, this is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. The problem is it's very impossible to measure. So if we look at what we want to measure as we are getting older, we want to know when the physical function is failing and people are becoming frail. When they become frail, we want to try and reverse it so that they can age successfully. And that's really what we're talking about here. And clearly frailty and sarcopenia are two big areas. We've talked about ICOPE before. Just to point out, it's a nice approach, an idea of the things we should look at, and right at the top of the WHO approach is to improve musculoskeletal function, mobility, and their idea of vitality, that is to stop frailty. Okay. I always like to show the slides, and many have seen it before, but this just shows that if you're a football player or a soccer player and you are going to peak, you peak at around about the age of 28. And I can take any sport except swimming because you peak even earlier with swimming and show the same thing, that somewhere between 28 to 30 you are at your best, and after that you go downhill. You go downhill about 0.5 to 1% per year. If you get sick, you go down quicker. If you exercise, you go down a little slower. And that's really what we're talking about when we're looking at sarcopenia and frailty. We're trying to slow that trajectory from around about 30 years of age. So if as a geriatrician I see people at 70, I'm already too late. I think Francesco Landi tried to say that. He said we should be working on the young people to make sure that we can go forward. So the frailty definition I like is that it occurs under stressful conditions. The person has diminished ability to carry out important practical social activities of daily living. Importantly, to be useful, it has to be distinguished from disability. And that is very important because disability is different. We've all done comprehensive geriatric assessments. It will improve people with disability, but we're talking about a 6-month period. If you pick up people early, you now may talk about 5, 10, 20 years where you can make a difference. So in my mind, when we're talking of frailty, we're talking before you become disabled. If you're disabled, you're frail. I accept that. I don't care. That's something that we need a rehabilitation person to do, but it is not what we want to really make the big differences. And the frailty cascade that exists says that psychological, social, and biological factors will all produce frailty, and then from there you'll go on to functional deficit, hospitalization, nursing home, and death. And that's the sort of cascade of all our lives. We want to slow that down where we can. I strongly support the physical phenotype definition by Linda Fried and her colleagues, where they said weight loss, 10 pounds, exhaustion, self-report, weakness, walking speed, no physical activity defines basically frailty. And they had people without disability in their original cohort, and it was about 7% in the American population over 70. So these are originally fit people, and this is where it is. And this is where you can start to say, I can fix physical frailty. This is where you can couple it with sarcopenia. The other definition of frailty, the big one that's out there, is something that Dr. Ken is an excellent clinician. He's a superb thinker. He's great at computers, and he's totally useless at frailty because what he talks about is comorbidity. And there are comorbidity indexes such as a Charleston that exist out there. They don't tell you anything about how to fix the person. So if I've got 28 diseases, I'm sick. I know this. And if the doctors come and fix my 28 diseases, I will have 412 medicines, and then I will die, because the doctors will, that's death by physician. Okay, cardiologists, very good at killing people by giving too many drugs. So you've got to recognize, I don't find this useful. Other people I know do, if you're in England, but you know, England are going through Brexit, so it tells you how stupid the English are. That's all I can say about that, so let's get away from that. What we have to realize is we're moving into a world of P4 medicine, or patient-centered medicine. Each patient is somewhat different. So while we can make diagnoses, recognize things, we need to, for each patient, say, what is it that I can fix for you? And in the end, this will all be done by a robotic with AI, because none of us can remember all the things that are going on. But at the moment, the electronic health record is totally useless for any of you who have to use it, so let's accept that we are not yet at the robotic stage. So if we look towards frailty, we're looking for biomarkers. And this is actually a paper based on the Lockwood frailty approach. And you'll see that there are multiple different things. There's inflammation, mitochondria, and apoptosis, calcium homeostasis, fibrosis, neuromuscular junction, and I'll point out progranulin over there for a reason, cytoskeleton and hormones and other principles. And all of these are potential biomarkers of people being sick, not necessarily of physical frailty. So we can go on from that, and we can say, can you find a biomarker? So instead of having to ask the person, are you fatigued, go through all those things that Linda Fried does that take about 30 minutes to 20 to 45 minutes and do them, you can basically say, I can measure a piece of blood, get a result, because this is how American physicians work, and it's so nice if you have a lab result. And we've been looking at this, and Andy Wynn in our program recently has looked at progranulin because we could measure it, not for any good reason. But it turns out that progranulin is highly specific for frailty in our African American population aged 50 to 65. It's specific to saying people are frail, and it's highly specific to predict who is going to get frail. So it's interesting. I don't believe it's going to be the only frailty marker, and I know it is a marker for other things as well. But at least in this study, we managed to show it as a specific biomarker. So that is one of the two new things I'm going to tell you today. This is a clinical frailty scale. I hate it. Why do I hate it? Because if you look at it, if I'm severely frail, very frail, and terminally ill, I can tell everybody that they're that. And if I'm very fit and well and managing well, I can tell everybody. Once you've got that, you've got 2 points. Every study that looks at whether this works says, well, we get a great correlation between this. But once you've got 2 big points at the ends, it tells you nothing about the people in the middle. And unfortunately, that's where we as clinicians are bad, and we work with this area. When you go to a GP who doesn't work in this area, they're very bad at picking up those subtle differences. So you have to have a measurement. So before we go to measurements, I think we have to know that we need primary prevention for every older person. And primary prevention means getting people involved in exercise. And I'm going to say exercise 1,000,000 times in this talk. Okay, so if all you remember when you go out, you have to put exercise programs together, you will change your country and your town, and you'll do something good. If you remember progranulin and the other things I'm going to talk about, this is a total waste of time. Okay, just remember exercise. This is the Singapore Professor Richmond study. I could have shown Jean Wu's, but I had trouble with putting too many things on one slide. But the Cadenza Jockey Club studies, the stuff Jean showed earlier this week, they are all, it's down there at the end, yes. So all of these work very well, and we need to recognize they work. And we need to have primary intervention exercise programs paid by the government that are free to everybody, that are exciting, and that people want to go to. And it's no use having somebody who thinks it's a job and they're there saying, okay, you should do some exercises now. And they're saying, come on guys, come on, why don't you all move? Let's see you moving here. Move, move, move. How do you move? You see how hard it is to get people to exercise. You've got to work with us to make us exercise. And that is the secret of primary prevention. Working with people, making them do it. Secondary prevention, this is our approach, and it works very well. We use the rapid geriatric assessment. We have 5 questions for frail, 5 questions for sarcopenia, 4 questions for appetite and anorexia, and 3 questions for the rapid cognitive screen. And it puts together the things we want to know. And we also ask if you have advanced directives. And we've added to this now loneliness, because people who are lonely don't exercise, they do nothing, they get depressed, they get sarcopenic, they finish up getting heart disease, they have a major burden on the system. And a lonely person is lonely because they can't talk to other people. They've been lonely all their life. And so when you want to do a circle of friends, as they do in Finland, where they get wonderful outcomes, it's teaching people to talk to other people. It's not just bringing them together, because otherwise they do nothing. So we need to recognize this. So this is the Singapore program Professor Merchant has put together with her colleagues, using an app for the rapid geriatric assessment. Hopefully by December, January, it's going to be regularly available as an app, and it's a great way to do the screening in the community. And it not only does the screening, it goes on and tells you what to look at. This original screen takes about 3 to 3.5 minutes to do, but if you have things wrong with you, it can take longer. This can be done by anyone. You can train a volunteer to do this, and we have trained volunteers. We've looked at over 14,000 people now in Missouri, and we train all sorts of people to do it, and it's a very good starting point, because you want to know where everybody is, and it should be done every year over the age of 65, if you're a diabetic, over the age of 50, if you've got COPD, over the age of 50, and we've got data in diabetics and COPD. They get secondary sarcopenia very early, and they go on to get frailty. So this is just the frail very quickly, the fatigue, resistance, aerobic, walk a block, illnesses, more than 5 illnesses, loss of weight. This is not an absolute, it's an idea. So Rishma has told me in Singapore, a lot of depressed people won't say they're fatigued, because in Singapore, saying you're fatigued means I'm old. So basically, then you ask, are you fatigued or old? It's very easy, you can modify this. Obviously, an American block is different to a Taiwanese block and so on. So you can use any one of these you like, and the loss of weight. And there are 35 plus validations. We heard people trying to change the definition for sarcopenia. You can do the same for frailty. Change it for your ethnic group. Make things that matter. It's just a quick screen, you know. There's nothing magical. It took me 15 minutes to do, and I did it on a dirty napkin in Barcelona because I was bored at going to a meeting like this. Okay, so 15 minutes on a dirty napkin. Its value is only to say we have to be aware of frailty and look for it, and GPs do not look for it, so this is the reason it exists. And in fact, I didn't validate it. It was validated originally by Leon Flicker in Perth in Australia, because he used it and sent a paper to the journal Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism saying low testosterone predicts frailty. And they said, well, you use the fail and there's no validation. So Leon, being a good friend of mine, instead of asking me for a validation, he knew there wasn't going to be one. He went and validated it himself. And since then, many validations. This is in our 50 to 65-year-old population. And it works as well to predict people who are going to be frail as any of the definitions out there. It's not highly sensitive, but neither are any of these other definitions. So you have to recognize you can choose a definition and run everything else, the other definitions against them. They all work terribly against any of the other definitions, you know, so they're all specific. So they tell you the person's got a problem. This is from Jean Wu in Hong Kong, where she showed again that the specificity is very good for frail with all the others. The study in Singapore that was done basically in hospital, showing that frail in hospital predicts outcomes. And I'm going to tell you it works in every situation because we've done it everywhere. This is in Taiwan in type 2 diabetics, and it's important to recognize that what it does is it tells you that you are going to have more hospitalization, you're going to finish up spending more time in hospital, you're going to get more heart disease, etc., etc., etc. It's a very good indicator, and there's a study in Spain that showed if you have a myocardial infarction, and I do frail, It tells you when you're going to have your next myocardial infarction, better than any of the other measurements they had in Spain. Okay, so what it says is, it tells you you're at more risk of getting other things. That's all it's trying to do. That's why it should be screened. This is from over 12,000 people who are over the age of 65 that we have. And you'll notice that in physician screening, about 20% will come up positive, which is higher. But this is because if you come to a physician, you're usually sick. If I screen in the community, the people who come to see me are the sick people. Nursing homes, about 71%. Hospitals, 45 to 50%, and obviously it goes up as people get older, and 85 plus, a lot of people are frail. The next piece of it is which of these is the best screen. So in the United States, fatigue is the best screen. In Singapore, it's the worst screen. Okay, so telling you that it's going to be different in each place, you need to recognize that. But the reason each of these are here is that you can treat them. And so this is when you find something, and this is done with the app from Singapore. Basically, if you're fatigued, you want to know, is the person depressed? Because it's a common cause of fatigue. And the second thing you want to know is, does your bed partner kick you awake at night because they think you're dead? i.e. sleep apnea. And when I first started talking about sleep apnea in Singapore, they told me nobody in Singapore has sleep apnea. They're all skinny, there's no problem, they're wonderful. But then I found a study, and somewhere between 20 to 40% of people over 60 have sleep apnea in Singapore. Just nobody ever looks for it because you can't have sleep apnea in Singapore. It's all central, you're not allowed to have it. Okay, so recognize that. And then there are other things that you can measure. Then you go on to the aerobic things and the resistance. These are sarcopenic people who need resistance exercise and aerobic. For a long time I said they needed vitamin D as well. I think we have gone crazy on vitamin D. I think if you look at the literature carefully, you will discover it's all epidemiological literature, and sick people don't go outside. If you don't go outside, you have a low vitamin D. You most probably need to get a little bit of vitamin D. You don't need more than 1,000 international units maximum, no matter what. There's no data to support higher doses, and we grossly overdo it. And it depends on your skin color. If you are black, like a lot of people are in St. Louis, they have normal vitamin D levels that are about 10. Very low, so that's 5 nanomole per millimole and an animal. Well, anyhow, very low. Okay, so just recognize that if you have a black skin, you have very little binding for the vitamin D. Professor Merchant has done this in Chinese, they're looking at the bioavailable in Chinese, Malaysians, and Tamil Indians. Huge variability in what you need. So if you're not going to measure it properly, just forget giving it and don't measure the stuff because it doesn't work. The illnesses is there purely to say if you've got more than 5 illnesses, you're going to be on more than 5 drugs, you need to have a doctor try and get rid of some of these drugs before you get killed by doctor. Killing by doctor is a very common thing when you get old because every specialist you go to gives you a new drug and eventually you're on so many drugs they all interact and they kill you. And then the loss of weight, the Meals on Wheels, helps to pick up the early signs. And importantly in Australia, the aged care minister has said that frailty screening is a canary in the coal mine for older people, and it's a game changer, and that it can be reversed by safe, simple, inexpensive, and practical interventions. I've never met him, so this had nothing to do with me. I will tell you, I go to Adelaide a lot, and they think this is totally nonsense, so I've been telling them this forever, and they go do the Lockwood thing, and they have nothing to offer other than exercise. Okay, so realistically, I'm not saying everybody in Australia does it, but Australia did a big study before they did this. It's unpublished, but they based this on the study they did. It's also recommended in parts of Spain, according to Professor Rodriguez-Manes. And he hasn't given me a reference, so maybe I don't speak enough Spanish. Okay, so therefore, exercise, multiple studies have suggested if you're frail, no matter how we measure it, you're going to be better if you exercise, and all these things are most probably going to get better. And even if you're in hospital and you're frail, you exercise, you are going to get better. And it's very important to remember, exercise reverses frailty to some extent. We do need to do that, and here is a study done by Professor Ng in Singapore, and he said if you talk to people, i.e. do cognitive stuff, if you give them good food, or if you exercise them, you will fix frailty. In other words, paying attention to people who are frail makes them better. So we've got to say, if you've got frailty, have programs there that people will pay attention to you, get you involved, so you do things, and then miraculously you get better. Okay. This is a study, the Vivi Frail study, Michael Esquerdo and Leo Manos Rodriguez, which basically says that if you put people who are frail into the Vivi Frail program, you save money. Okay, so the important thing is exercise saves money. That's what's the Vivi Frail program. So we had this argument with Gustavo, testosterone in frail people, this is the English study, basically increased lean mass, increased isometric peak torquening extension, improved your sexual life, almost increased physical performance, and it does improve bone strength. Gustavo is right, there is no study that shows it truly stops fracture, but nobody, because it's not a very expensive drug, wants to do the 10, 20, 30, 100,000 people that you need, like you do with statin. You know, statin, it takes 18 years to get a 1% decrease in mortality, and so it's 1 out of 100 after 18 years if you take a statin. Those are the studies you need to do to show you can improve hip fracture. Nobody's going to do it unless it's for a very expensive drug. Testosterone and injections work better and they're safer. Okay, we use the frail NH study, which has been done now in France. It's also been done in Hong Kong. And this is to pick up people who are at the end of life. And this is saying these people are very sick. And if you look at it, here is the Hong Kong mortality study using their MDS data on a version of the frail NH. And it decreased mortality, basically, if you're a frail NH, you're going to die, you're going to have more ADL dependence, you're going to fall more often, and you're going to be hospitalized more often. This is to say these people belong in a palliative care hospice program. These are not the people who should go back to hospital all the time. All you do when you take somebody like this and send them back to hospital every 3 months or something is you try to kill them earlier. Hospitals are dangerous places for people who are frail. Doctors don't treat you very well in hospital. Last time I went in hospital, which was about 8 years ago, they woke me up at 4 o'clock to get blood tests from me. I lasted 1 whole day because at the end of the day I decided I was so abused, I signed myself out of hospital, made the diagnosis of the physician who was on my faculty had failed to make, which is I had cholecystitis, put myself on Levaquin and went home and tried to find a surgeon who promised me they would not keep me in hospital more than 5 hours, including the operation time, which is what happened. Okay, and I did very well. You know, I shouldn't have spent 7 weeks. I lost 70 pounds in the 7 weeks. So you shouldn't take 7 weeks to get your gallbladder fixed. That's all I can tell you, okay, unless you want to be malnourished. So we need to remember it's important that the brain talks to the legs and vice versa. So we have this, you can talk about it as you like. You can call it cognitive frailty, cognitive risk syndrome. We have the Taiwanese version and so on and so forth. They go together. So muscle and brain are talking all the time. If you get one, you're going to get the other. So you have to pay attention to both, which I think is very important. So there's an excellent article by Elsa Dent that just came out in Lancet, and this is the future of frailty. Expand the knowledge on the pathophysiology, that's biomarkers, we told you progranulin. Enhance clinical care, this is give more exercise, more exercise, more exercise. Improve methodological quality of clinical trials. We have very few long-term 2, 5-year 10-year trials, which is what we need to have if we want to really know how to fix frailty. We need to look at some model that is reproducible. Broaden the scope of interventions to the healthcare system, get it all out there, assess effectiveness of routine screening, and we're doing this, and they're doing it in Singapore and multiple other places at this stage. Identify the best instrument. It's got to be quick for primary care. Anything that is more than about 3 minutes is not going to be used in a 6-minute practice. Okay, so just expect. It's no good telling you, you've got to get a DEXA, you've got to get this, you've got to do that. It's not going to happen. So it's got to be quick. I don't mind what screen you use as long as it's quick. Remember, we need exercise programs. We need to educate healthcare professionals that this is an important syndrome in older people. It's more important than heart failure, because if you treat frailty, you're going to treat the bits of heart failure that are necessary. It helps you do the right thing at the right level, and then healthcare policy has to change. Okay, so that gets me through the frailty piece, and hopefully I've got some time left. Looking at it, very little time, so we'll go very quickly for sarcopenia. And sarcopenia has an ICD code. This is very important because it means you can bill for it in the United States. It's poor function associated with muscle loss. Many definitions, we're about to hear another Asian definition if I ever get off the stage, so we have to recognize that. And each of these definitions has problems, and we know that. And what are the problems for? Because we can't measure muscle mass. All the measurements of muscle mass are incredibly wrong, okay? And you can't compare one to the other. The circulated creatinine dilution technique is most probably the future, but there's not enough data, so that's where we're going to go. We have to recognize that you get fat, frail people, and that if you lose muscle and you're fat, you do terribly. If you're fat and you have muscle, please don't make them lose muscle. Despite what Deborah said, it's not good for fat people. They do very well if you don't lose muscle, but if you have no muscle, then I need to exercise you and get rid of your fat. It's very simple in my mind. Multiple genes. If you're born small, you're going to get sarcopenia. If you have a problem with your appellate, you're going to get sarcopenia. And this is what I think is an excellent biomarker. We've just got this data this week. Neurofilament light chain, which is the same as C-agrin, which Cornell Seaver showed, picks up people with sarcopenia due to muscle problems. The neurofilament light chain seems to be equally good, and as no one produces C-agrin anymore, this may be, if you want to diagnose sarcopenia, you get a blood test, you've got your diagnosis. You don't have to ask questions, look at people. Many causes of sarcopenia. Remember that it can be neurological, vascular, low testosterone, decreased physical activity, lousy food intake. The SARC-F, I thank the Japanese who showed that SARC-F basically predicts grip strength, quadriceps, and there's no overlap for any of these. So all of these other tests take longer. So if the Japanese are right, and I like the Japanese always, but this time I love the Japanese because they say something that took 15 minutes for me to do, it gets rid of all these other tests. So I think they may be right. Jean Wu again did an excellent study showing that its predictability of poor outcomes is very high. We have shown that in diabetics, sarcopenia predicts your outcomes over the age of 50 in diabetes. It's got nothing to do with hemoglobin A1C. It's purely got to do if you've got no muscle, you've got no insulin receptors, and you're going to have insulin resistance. It's not that you phosphorylate serine threonine to the GLUT receptor and all that junk I learned as an endocrinologist. It's purely no muscle, insulin resistance. Okay, don't go looking for what's wrong with the receptor if you've got no muscle. SARC-F in Taiwan has been shown to predict emergency care use, hospitalization, decreased quality of life, and if you add calf circumference, you improve sensitivity. If you've got time to do it, I think it's a reasonable thing to do. It's now, SARC-F is recommended, I don't know about the Asian group, but by everybody else they have recommended it. So at this stage, the treatment for sarcopenia, surprisingly, is resistance and aerobic exercise, just the same as for frailty. And most importantly, you saw some of the bed rest data, but basically, this is a study by Michael Esquerdo that he showed that if you get an exercise therapist who goes into hospital and does that on top of usual therapy. Usual therapy is a physical therapist in the hospital. Most physical therapists in hospitals are useless. Okay, they do nothing. They get people out of bed and they may walk them a little bit. They don't exercise them. Raquel exercised them, and suddenly they all did much better than the physical therapist. I'm sorry for the physical therapist in the audience. You're like I am. Most of the time as a doctor, I'm useless. I understand that. I try and learn how to be better by finding a team member who does something better. And you can, in the ICU, exercise people, and you never tie anybody down in hospital. tying people down in hospital is abusive, and if you do it, you should never be allowed to practice medicine again. That's my version, and I get very angry when people tie people down. I'm told by ICU people they've got to do it, and I pointed out to them multiple times that they should not be allowed to work in an ICU. That's not the nurse, that's the physician, because they like to tie people down. It's fun. You know, there's this disease called BDSM. It's fun. People go out there and they do all these funny sexual things. It's okay. I don't mind if you do it with your partner. Your partner wants to do it, particularly if your partner does it to you if you want it. Okay, that's fine. But don't do it to old people in hospital. We've had Maria Piataroni, my first fellow, was the first person to go into nursing homes, get people to lift heavy weights. They do really well. We use her equipment now in hospital down in Perry County, and people line up to do it. We were told nobody would do this exercise machine in hospital. They line up and they say, it's like going to Disneyland. This is so exciting. And they've got an exercise program that works extraordinarily well. So the big part of sarcopenia and management is compliance. As the doctor says, what fits your busy schedule better, exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day, and I think it's being dead. We heard an excellent talk from Professor Landy, and I agree with what he's talking about. There's a lot of controversy about how you get protein into the cell, and that I think we have a way to go. I am little suspicious that beta-hydroxybutyrate doesn't get into the cell quite as well as the leucine does, and both of them struggle to get into the cell. Theoretically, it should be better. This is a protein study done by Jürgen Bauer and others across Europe, which showed that protein does improve your outcome a little bit, did not meet the primary outcomes. Vitamin D goes down with aging, and that means it should be very good for older people. But when you actually go and look at the data, you've got to have very low vitamin D levels before vitamin D makes a difference to muscle function. So recognize we've most likely been oversold. The best data available for muscle mass and strength is testosterone and anabolic steroids. It works pretty well. But nobody wants it because it's got to do with sex or something, and then people keep on saying it causes heart disease. We did a large meta-analysis, and injections of testosterone don't cause heart disease. The gel does because it increases estrogen more than testosterone early on. So you never ever use the gel. It's more expensive and it doesn't work as well. Growth hormone increases muscle mass, but it does absolutely nothing for strength. Ghrelin, which increases growth hormone, and there are whole different versions of it available now, including Anomorelin, increases muscle mass, but amazingly doesn't increase strength. Okay, so watch out when it comes on the market. It's not going to work. You can take antibodies and you can increase muscle mass by blocking myostatin. And you can do that in Belgian cows. You can do it in those whippets they're running. You can do it in a young boy who's got congenital lack of myostatin. Really good muscle. It's not strong. So there are studies that have looked at antibodies. They don't work very well. They sort of almost work and they give you bigger muscle. And if you want to CRISPR people, you can CRISPR out the myostatin, and these animals all look better, but they're not necessarily stronger. You can activin receptors are where myostatin works, so you can go ahead and do studies with this, but all the studies that have been done, the companies have sort of stopped doing them. And there's a reason for this. One is you get allergic reactions to the antibodies, and the second one is they don't work very well, and it's been tried in many areas, and the inclusion body myositis, which was the best data that they had in Switzerland, basically failed phase 2b3, so they don't work very well. People like to give stem cells. You can go to outside Chengdu, up into the mountains, and if you're very rich or a communist member, they will give you stem cells when you're old to make you do better. No data. This is the data available. It's terrible. This company is selling, I would say, horse manure to people who want to buy something. I mean, it's not, the data is just not good enough at the moment. I believe in stem cells. I really think there's a future, but I think we're not there yet. And it's got to be done in a civilized way and get there. Of course, we can just basically get electronic things like exoskeletons, and the exoskeletons are wonderful. If you can afford $1 million for your exoskeleton, you've solved your sarcopenia and you don't have to do anything. Professor Wakabashi is here, and he taught me ages ago that basically, if you have sarcopenia, you're going to have dysphagia and aspiration pneumonia. So if you find somebody in clinical practice who's got sarcopenia, look for dysphagia and start treating it. If the patient has dysphagia, look for sarcopenia. They go together, they're muscles, and the muscles of the body all seem to crumble at the same time. So to finish, sarcopenia is defined as lower perpendicular muscle lean mass, which we can't measure muscle, and low function, which we can measure. Sarcopenia is a major cause of everything that goes wrong with you. You can do a rapid screen. Biomarkers may exist, such as the neurofilament light chain, but we've got a long way to go, and whether that's useful or not, I think there are quicker ways to get there, and certainly in practice, but sometimes physicians need to measure something to make them feel good. Resistance exercise is a treatment of choice. I think with leucine-enriched essential amino acid, we need more data on vitamin D. Drugs are expensive, and none of them are as good, including testosterone, as exercise. So why give a drug when the treatment of choice is exercise? I know we want to waste the money for healthcare in each of our countries, because the country's got so much extra money for healthcare, okay? Particularly in the United States, where we spend so much money, a little bit more would make no difference. But what we have to recognize is we have to get people to do the things that work first, and that we need really big studies with aggressive exercise. A little bit of exercise is like no exercise. It's got to be hard exercise. Mikel Esquerdo, who's my god in this field, basically, used to be the coach for Barca and then for Liverpool, two very famous football teams. And basically, when he once sort of said, we've got babies who've got to stay at home, he went to a physical therapy school, and he thinks old people should be treated just the same as professional football players, and he is not wrong. You can't quite do it, but you've got to push. And with that, I will stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John, for your very exciting talk. It's not the first time for me to see John start to dance on the stage. So he looks like he still keeps the quality of dancing, so he's not frail. Okay, so we have 5 minutes for discussion.
I told you there was no time.
If you have any specific questions, one or two, we have a couple of times. So.
What I was doing was basically summarizing what you've heard in the meeting, okay, and trying to put it in a perspective that we use common sense.
No question? Okay. Please.
John, I have to ask you a question.
I can't answer your question because we agree on everything. What did I
Something about biomarkers that I cannot understand, biomarker frailty, and it's included on the data that's published about progranulin, is that there is no difference in terms of pre-frail and healthy. There is a difference between pre-frail, healthy, and frail, but no difference. And that has happened to many biomarkers. How can we explain that? Because maybe pre-frailty doesn't exist biologically.
Okay, so thank you once again for telling me you reviewed our paper on progranulin, which is not yet published. Okay, I am not telling you. I think it turned out it's a good marker for progranulin. What I really believe is an excellent marker for increase in inflammatory cytokines. And they've got to reach a certain level, which is what you see in the really frail people. So that's what I think it's actually doing. We've got other data that suggests that's true when we look at it for the central nervous system. So I don't know why I would expect to see a much more linear. It's not there. The neurofilament data, really, when I tell you it works for sarcopenia, it's about a third to a half of the group are very elevated, which is what you find if you start looking at how many people with sarcopenia have neurological problems. It's extraordinarily elevated in diabetics, for instance, who have sarcopenia. So they have basically neuropathy. But I do this because I like to do basic science, and it's so much fun, and I publish papers. I think, what I do in practice, I use these simple scales, and I put people into exercise programs, and I'm spending my grant money from the government now. It's mainly going all around our state, Missouri, which has got as many people as Singapore in it, but it's basically about 20 times the size, and I go all around trying to get people to screen and then do exercise. I think that's what we should be doing. I'm really excited about the basic science, but It's separate from what I think we should be doing, and I think we need to sell what we should be doing. But thank you again for reviewing the paper. And when it's rejected, I will phone you and say, why didn't you tell me that?
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, okay, let's close the session. Thank you very much, John. Okay, now let's move on to the